consider yourself loved?" "Well, Mr. Baum, I take that as a promise. See to it that you live up to it."
And it was evidently love at first sight. They were married within a year.
I think that was really a turning point in his life, because she allowed the childhood imagination to bloom, didn't squelch it, and I think actually encouraged it.
There's an interesting piece about him, that he had this very creative, sort of adventurous spirit, but also had a real deep sense of responsibility and taking care of his family.
Frank tried his best to settle down to the responsibilities of a wife and family, taking a job as a head salesman for one of the family businesses, Baum's Castorine Company. For several years, everything ran smoothly, but once again, fate intervened.
About that time, the family businesses went into terrible reversals, and so you have somebody who grew up in considerable comfort, now struggling to make a living, at which point Baum decided to take his wife and move to Aberdeen in Dakota Territory, where she had I think a brother and a sister.
It was the new hub, the new jumping off place, the opening of the West, the place where it was all happening. He went there with these great ideas of opening up this great Baum's Bazaar.
Baum never thought second rate. It always had to be the best. If he was going to open a store in South Dakota, it would have to be a luxury store, and it would have everything from bamboo scratchers to a fancy marble soda fountain.
But Baum's timing was off. Just as he arrived in South Dakota, the area fell under a prolonged and devastating drought that parched the land and withered the hopes and dreams of its inhabitants. For a time, Frank struggled along bravely, even publishing a local newspaper, the Aberdeen Saturday Pioneer. But his optimism was no match for the harsh realities imposed by the unforgiving environment.
After the failure of all of his enterprises in Aberdeen, South Dakota, he realized this was not the town to stay in, nor could he keep his now 4 boys and Maud there. So he looked around and he decided that Chicago was probably the best bet.
Frank set out for Chicago full of optimism for what opportunities lay ahead in America's second largest city. But he soon found the going no easier than it had been in South Dakota. After some time, he finally managed to secure a job as a traveling salesman for Pitkin & Brooks, which sold fine china and glassware throughout the Midwest.
Travel in those days had to be very tough. Train, buggy, whatever it was. And of course you had to carry all of your stuff with you. But I think it also gave him time when he wasn't selling or sitting in that hotel room to think about his stories and to write things down and explore his own imagination.
Alfred Baum spent a lot of his time on the road when his children were growing up. And whenever he came home, he would spend his evenings with them. And he loved telling them stories.
The local children would find out, and the next thing you know, he'd be on the steps on that nice evening in Chicago, a little breeze off the lake or something, telling all these wonderful stories to the children, and obviously watching their response, until the local constable would have to come by and say, "Susie, your parents are looking for you," because they always knew where the local kids would be.
Frank Baum was essentially an entertainer. And in those days, that was a great, great gift. It always is, but in those days, there was no radio, there were no phonographs, there were no movies. A lot of people couldn't afford stage shows, and people made their own entertainment.
At the time, his children were learning their Mother Goose rhymes, so he told some stories based upon the rhymes.
He took the Mother Goose tales and basically just told them as you would tell them the bedtime story, or you would talk to a child and tell them the story instead of reading it to them in either rhyme or imagery that they were not used to, especially since most of them came from Europe. They were not necessarily recognizable, or all of the places were recognizable to the children. So he was trying to explain them and basically kind of Americanize it.
I don't think he fully understood how powerful his ability to write for children was. He always attributed his decision to try that in his 40s to his mother-in-law.
Matilda is the one who would come to visit the Baums as the marriage obviously succeeded. And she would listen to Frank tell the stories to the children. And it was she, although she died, God bless her, 2 years before The Wizard of Oz was published, it was she who, again, is part of family legend as saying in so many words, "Frank Baum, you're a damn fool if you don't write those stories down."